it's very important to know the relationship between percents, fractions, and decimals because all three of these describe a part of a whole. And so sometimes we're given something in one of these forms and it just is easier for us to work with in a different form, and we need to know the equivalence of percents, fractions, and decimals. So we're going to start with what we call benchmarks. And I like to think of a benchmark as something that you can picture. Okay, so for example, if I say 100%, we could picture a fraction. And if we think about our 100 grid or our 10 by 10 grid, we could think of that as 100 over 100. And in decimal form, that would be 1 whole, which would be 1. Another benchmark, 50%. Okay, 50%. If I give you 50% of my sandwich, what am I giving you? I'm giving you a half of my sandwich. And thinking about it in terms of money, because that always helps us a lot when we're talking about decimals, half a dollar would be 50 cents. Okay, we can leave it as 0.5, but because we're talking about percents and percents relates to hundredths, we are going to put 0.50 because that's our hundredths, right? This is tenths place and this is the hundredths place. Okay, now what else is a benchmark? What else can we picture? Well, I can picture 25%, because again, if I take that sandwich and I cut it into 4 equal pieces or fourths, okay, that would be 25% of a sandwich is each fourth. And again, if I think about money, that's going to be 25 cents. Okay, and now there are a couple of other ones that we really need to know. And again, benchmarks are something you can picture, but realistically in this classroom setting, benchmarks are percents, fractions, and decimals that you need to memorize. So another one of the most important ones would be 10%. And 10% is 1/10. And again, if we're talking about tenths, it would be 0.1, but we're talking about percent, so that would be 10 hundredths. And one last one, which I always like to talk about, is 20%. And 20%, you can see 20% is twice as much as 10%, and that would be 2/10, which is 1/5, and that would be 20 cents if we were talking about money. If you want to get really ambitious, you could also talk about 33 1/3%. And that would be equal to your fraction 1/3. And 1/3 is a benchmark fraction because we can picture what 1/3 looks like. And that would be 0.33 repeating. And when we repeat a decimal, it means the number underneath that little bar is repeating forever and ever, and it never ends. And so these are basic benchmarks we should understand, we should know, we should be able to convert from one to the other. And now we're going to take a look and we're going to see how we can convert between percents, fractions, and decimals using our 10 by 10 grid. And let's just take a few. Let's shade in. Let's see. What if I did this? Okay. Let me see. How about this? So if I shaded in this would be, each of these columns is 10 boxes, and each box is 1%. So each of these columns is 10%. So here's 10, 20, and I shaded in 23 boxes, which is, well, let's make this a little bit thinner. That's what I say when I look in the mirror. Okay, so we have 23%, and we know that that's 23 hundredths. Well, when I hear that, I think 23 hundredths, I think of 23 over 100. And then 23 hundredths as a decimal is 0.23, because again, remember, this is the tenths, this is the hundredths. So 23 hundredths would end in the hundredths place. Okay, let's do another one. Let's do okay, let's do that. Okay, and if you count the boxes, again, you have 2, 4, 6, 8. Each one is 1%, right? And that would be 8%. 8%, 8 out of 100, or 8 over 100. Now, when I have a fraction equivalent of a percent, it's always going to be hundredths. But that doesn't mean that I can't simplify that fraction. And if I want to simplify that fraction, let me do it over here with my upside down division. Okay, I can see that 4 goes into 8 2 times, and 4 goes into 125 times. Okay, so this is the same as 2 over 25. And again, going back to 8 hundredths as a decimal, I would have to put an 8 in the hundredths place. Okay, now let's do an important one. Okay, here we go. No, you know what? Let's actually do 3/10, right? We have 3 rows of 10 boxes. So that would be 30%. And 30%. Now, if you look at this as 30 boxes, you can say that this represents 30 hundredths, because each box, again, is 0.01. I should have done this. Okay. And so if I think again, percents, 30 hundredths, that would be 30 over 100. But if I look at it like this, if I look at it as tenths, right? This is 1/10. Each of these is 10 boxes, or 10 over 100. And each of these is 1/10 of the whole thing, because there are 10 rows. So that equals 3/10, because it's 3 rows. And as a decimal, I can either put 30 hundredths, because remember, we're talking about percents, or you should also recognize that it would be 3/10. Okay. One more, and then I think, hopefully, we can get the idea of this. Let's see. What if I do this? What if I shaded in this much? Okay, now, again, each of these is 1/100th, or 1/100th like this, or 1%, right? These are all the same way of writing 1%. And how many do I have? Well, I shaded in 5 times 5 boxes, or 25 boxes. So that's 25%. And you can probably see that that would be 25 hundredths, or 25 over 100. But look at the big picture, right? If I look this way, how much did I shade in of the whole thing? I shaded in 1/4. And we said before that 25 over 100 is equal to 1/4. 25% is 1/4. And we also said that it is equal to 0.25, or 25 cents. So that's a little bit of an idea of how we can understand conversion between percents, fractions, and decimals.